Welcome. This is the Health and Wellness Coach Journal podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jessica Singh, the founder and CEO of the Center for Health and Wellness Coaches. This is a podcast for coaches to explore topics related to health, wellness, and coaching, sharing knowledge and sharing light. Dr. Anna Tavis is a clinical professor and chair of the Human Capital Management Department at NYU's School of Professional Studies. She is the director of NYU Coaching Innovation Lab and the host of NYU Coaching Tech Summit. Dr. Tavis is a co-author of Humans at Work, The Art and Practice of Creating the Hybrid Workplace, and The Digital Coaching Revolution. Prior to joining the NYU faculty, Dr. Tavis navigated a diverse global career in business, consulting, and academia. In business, Dr. Tavis was the head of Motorola's EMEA OD function based in London, Nokia's global head of talent management based in Helsinki, and United Technologies Corporation's chief learning officer, and the head of talent and organization development with AIG Investments. In academia, Dr. Tavis was on the faculty at Columbia University, Williams College, and Fairfield University. Dr. Tavis is a frequent presenter at international conferences on the topics of future of work, people analytics and technology, employee experience, and intelligent automation in the workspace. She is a senior fellow with the Conference Board and is the academic in residence with Executive Networks. She is currently an associate editor of Workforce Solutions Review, a publication of the International Association for Human Resource Information Management, and the Journal of Total Rewards, a publication of World at Work. Welcome, Anna. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Delighted to join you again today.
So many rich experiences to choose from. So to begin, I'll ask, as you reflect on the experiences and turning points that have shaped you to where you are today, what stands out to you most and what are you most grateful for?
It's really interesting, Jessica, to find it of all the milestones as you read my bio. And I think the thread through this whole history is really learning what it means to be a human at work. Because we are born human, we are socialized, etc. And then we start working, and that's a different experience on how we relate to work, how we relate to each other in the context of work. And that takes a big chunk of our lives. And so I think that a combination of working in organizations as well as then being an academic and doing research on the topics of human productivity and being an employee in the organization, those are two complementary sides to then write a book on humans at work, because I do think that we need to continue to examine that space, especially now. And it's interesting, Jessica, that I had so many other things that I've done after 2022 when Humans at Work was published. But I keep returning to the same themes because with the new technology that's now fundamentally disrupting and transforming the workplace, like AI, the question of who the humans are at work and what it would mean for us to work going forward is back in the center of the conversation. So if there is that running theme through my whole career, is really adjusting, adapting to the new requirements of being successful at work, and then sharing that experience with now my students and the broader audiences through the book, other publications, as well as podcasts and webinars similar to what we're doing now.
It's incredible because your work with humans at work. I remember when I first met you a couple years ago at the ICF, there was a conference at NYU, and just even learning that NYU had a department of human capital management. I mean, this might sound really sheltered or mind-boggling, but I was like, wait a second, there is a science of working with people, and you got into this, a pioneer in this field. And so I'd love to know how you've seen this work evolve, especially like you mentioned with all the advance in technology.
Yeah. One of the challenges for our program is really having people even know about us. And people know about marketing, people know about project management and other types of kind of technology adjacent skills from high school. That's where there's a lot of attention. And given, obviously, as a consumer, you are bombarded by the products of the marketing profession, right? That's what they're all about. However, the irony of what I do is that almost 100% of population has no idea that this profession even exists. The majority of people think of people management as administration, and the entry point into HR is really recruitment. Everyone has experienced a recruiter or applying for jobs, et cetera, et cetera, and that's the vision for HR. And then when people join organizations and they start working in organizations, they suddenly find that there is a job, there is a profession that's sole focus is on making people more productive, making people motivated. There's a science of managing teams. And that's what we're experiencing at NYU in our department. You're not alone in being surprised because the majority of our students come from other first time experiences that they had with the workplace. Then they discover that there is a function like HR and they want to jump in. And that's how they find us, to your point, that it's not only that this work needs to be done, but there is a whole science associated with doing the work in the organizations right. And so we have PhDs, we have obviously journals dedicated to managing people in organizations. And I see the trajectory of most professionals, regardless of what they do, from again, the project management, marketing, strategy, and you can just continue to name the list. At the end of the day, they want to learn what we know best, and that is how to manage people.
Right. And for those who haven't yet had the pleasure of reading Dr. Tavis's work, I know you also co-authored this book with Stella Lupushore.
Yes.
And so highly recommend Dr. Tavis's book. And thank you, like you said, for sharing this because of that lack of awareness. Most people simply don't know that exists, which is counterintuitive because it is so well needed. For those who haven't yet had the pleasure of reading your book, would you mind sharing what it's about?
So the humans at work, we came together as a team with my co-author Stella Lupushore. She's also a collaborator on so many different projects. And what I love about collaborating with Stella is that she actually comes from computer science. She's a computer scientist, and my background is very humanistic, very based in various types of human sciences. I was a linguist, I studied philosophy, I did a lot of human centric disciplines before I got my MBA. So, my PhD is in comparative literature, which required deep dives into the kind of what I think is the best of humanity. So we came together to write it pre sort of AI, pre commercialization of AI tools, but still wrestling with the same issues around what do people do at work and how much of their humanity really shows up. And I have to say, in writing this book, there was a lot of productive tension because as an engineer, Stella was always coming up with frameworks and taxonomies and really brilliant ways of structuring everything. And my tendency was always to tell a story and to go deeper into historical connections and bring that perspective to our view of who humans at work really are. And I think we came the full circle with AI, where the kind of the very rigid, at least from my point of view, engineering laws of running organizations are being replaced with technology doing that structured part. And then really a huge demand for the human side of work, which is critical thinking, judgment, a relationship, collaboration, coordination, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're on the verge of creating very different types of organizations which are going to be running our businesses, our government, everything else. I think this is the moment of implosion of the old systems. And as we are still in the search of what's coming, it's a very dangerous time because obviously, as transition is happening, a lot of people will feel displaced. At the same time, there's a lot of opportunity. So I look at it as a renaissance of what kind of organizations will emerge out of this rupture that we're going through right now.
That historical importance and context was so needed, and I really loved that in the book. Even right from the beginning, you talk about the fourth industrial revolution and the trend of how workers are expected to do more with less. My background's in healthcare, but I know people can widely relate. So as you talk about organizations needing to lead differently, that's telling the story about how it's one of the most complex relationships in life, our relationship with work. And so I would love to ask you more about that.
I'm so glad that you bring up healthcare because healthcare actually did kind of fall victim to this efficiency model that we had starting in the last century. And in researching this book, I found out that kind of scientific management, Frederick Taylor, who was the founder of this whole trend that we've lived through up until now, of rationalizing and optimizing and a kind of efficiency driven organizations really affected even areas like healthcare, where you're dealing with the humans and it just doesn't lend itself all the time to the linear way of working. But because it was so predominant from the point of view of structuring organizations, healthcare organizations were also configured that way. And this is wrong. We, I think, need to transition into the space where every organization needs to be organic and responding to the mission of their organization rather than the efficiency. And I quote a lot from Peter Drucker, who is the founder of management science. And in the mid of the last century, he was very visionary around where we could end up if we don't really pay attention to doing things in the most human and organic way. So that conversation about humanity vis-a-vis linear and automated way of working or living goes back to the early 20th century. So I think that historical perspective is very important as we are beginning to rethink where we're going to end up as AI is again disrupting the old ways of working. So that's my message about the future, where there's a lot of opportunity for us to fundamentally rethink and redesign the old ways of being and the old ways of working.
Absolutely. And I love the framework, the 4+3, the W's framework that you developed as a way of addressing this and moving forward.
Yeah, so again, thanks to my computer science co author, we really agreed on anchoring ourselves in these core concepts. And I will just discuss 4 W's: work, workplace, workforce, and worth. So, again, how we relate to work. What does workplace look like? Workforce is the us humans in the work environment. And worth, we really needed another W to rhyme, but it's really what is it worth for us? It's the meaning, it's the value, it's the hope and vision that we bring to the workplace. So that's how we came up with 4 W's, and we discussed this as this cluster evolves. And again, I was giving the kind of the storytelling tale of it with the historical perspective, with some of the philosophical references of what it has meant for generations. And then obviously trying to project into the future of where we're going to be. And I do think in rethinking how we reorganize ourselves in the wake of this AI disruption, we absolutely need to have the historical perspective. And unfortunately, we oftentimes just stop at this industrial revolution. A lot of the things that I read about AI and historical comparisons don't go any further than industrial revolution. That is the 1800s, and obviously it started a little earlier. and then the last century. But the same issues, the same concepts were true much before that. And I love the comparison of what we're living through to Renaissance rather than the Industrial Revolution, which gives you a lot more hope, a lot more opportunity, and really looks at the age of AI and the post AI as a revival of some of the most human ways of being, organizing ourselves, working, etc. And that's where I want to spend my time and how I want to show up both in my current work and create the legacy for the future.
And one of the things that you also talked about with the organizations, with the emphasis on efficiency and best practices through all of this, as you mentioned, the historical context is the lack of empathy. And so
Yeah.
I had to pause when I first read it. And when you mentioned it, when I heard you speak of it for the first time, because it almost seemed counterintuitive, but it's absolutely right. And so I'm wondering how you feel that empathy might help provide a solution moving forward.
I think empathy and return to empathy. If I were to write something now, I would really challenge us, urge us to return to empathy because I think we left empathy behind with the automation and hardcore work culture. I think there's a lot written now about how the work culture has changed, even from a few years ago when employee experience, holistic view of employees was celebrated, diversity, inclusion, appreciating and valuing people's differences, etc. And that was all scrapped away for this hardcore efficiency culture that really reduced humans to a cogs in the machine again. I mean, the image of Charlie Chaplin caught up in the machinery of the early 20th century is really coming to mind. And at the same time, I do think that these technologies, being tools, and tools are always very neutral, depending on how we use them, can bring out the empathy because these tools are created to imitate and to provide humans with the empathetic response. And it may be very immature and at first not particularly effective and in the imitation of human emotions, but these tools are heading in that direction. And I know that there's a lot of concern about that, and I'm there as well. However, I do think that if used right, they could be really applied to bringing out empathy in humans just as much as empathetic human can do. But again, these tools should be used in the absence of the best available human.
Of course, as a way of increasing access.
Exactly, exactly.
So, given the need for emphasis and the, I guess, present day neglect of the emphasis of the human at work, where have you seen coaching come in? I know first, or at least it seemed like executive coaching offered to leadership development to C suite, and now there's more health and wellness coaching being integrated throughout organizations. And I'm wondering, there's always a catch 22 because when you think about humans at work, employee well being, at least in medicine, there is this bias that it's up to you to take care of your health and well being. You don't realize until afterwards it's the system actually is responsible for taking, the organization is responsible for this.
Yes, absolutely. I think there is definitely a self care. There is certainly a motivation. There are millions of dollars spent on the assessment at the point of recruitment, for example, of people trying to identify those individuals who are intrinsically motivated. We want to bring them to work. But I think there's a huge discount in this culture, and it's culturally varies around the world depending on kind of the cultural ideology and values, et cetera. But specifically in the United States and English speaking cultures, there's an overemphasis on individual responsibility and attributing some of the outcomes or behaviors, et cetera, exclusively to the individual, looking at their achievement again as individual achievement or their failure as individual failure. And I think we all know from our own experience and from science that in the majority of cases, It's really the social environment, the economic environment, the availability of support systems, etc. And I think that's where the organizations need to head in terms of supporting both individuals, but creating the structure and the frameworks and the cultures in which the humans can succeed. And coaching is a way of connecting an individual to the culture by really personalizing the outreach to the individual, because we all are familiar with the kind of industrial scale communication strategies that senior management executives, CEOs deploy, which is like an email or a Zoom call to the entire organization. The CEO standing on the podium speaking in a megaphone to motivate their employees. Coaching is a bottom up approach, not the bottom from the value perspective. In fact, it's a lot more valuable, but it really is about democratizing personalization and delivering it at the point of need. And this is where I think the future of development, the future of a lot of the employee initiatives in organizations will be tied to the ability of that organization integrate, adapt, and internalize the coaching approach to employee development, employee support, and employee services.
It's such an important insight for organizations and for coaches, obviously, to be aware of. And I'm going to advocate for your second book here and give a shout out, The Digital Coaching Revolution, that you wrote with Woody Woodward. One of the things that struck me too is you outlined when you talk about the key pillars of modern coaching, coaching platforms, the data driven coaching, the analytics, and for a remote workforce, AI powered tools, and the next generation coaching skills and credentials. It struck me because I know as we were developing the NYU program, the Health and Wellbeing Certificate, at least from the coaching side, when you go into a coach training, I think there's this focus of, oh, I need a certification, I need a credential. And what I love about this perspective that you shared is it's this huge organizational science. It's way beyond the individual coach, and how organizations also have to set that up. And coaches, it's so important for us to learn, because who's going to help share that knowledge and get this into organizations so that it's done in a way that is most effective?
That's absolutely true. And I think we start out because the intention here is to see how coaching affects organizational cultures at scale. Obviously, there's still a thriving practice of working one-on-one and career transitions and life coaching and other types of situations where it is primarily individual. And that's where coaching, including executive coaching, that's where coaching has traditionally stayed. But with the technology available to us now, we have not only a possibility, but also an obligation to be using those tools to the benefit of the entire organization. And that's accomplished through platforms, it's accomplished through the availability of data where, because the coaching is delivered at scale, management, if done right, can now look at the totality of, for example, what we call employee sentiment, because nowhere else will the sentiment show up better than in the individual coaching conversations that employees can have either through the platform or through AI driven coaching. And without betraying the confidentiality, we can now really harvest the information and the data and create like heat maps around organizational concerns, how the temperature of the organization goes up and down, similar to what we are doing with our wearables, etc. On the personal level, we now have that capability to do it at the organizational level. And that's where I think, and that's all additive to a really skilled coach working with individuals. And obviously, I also see coaches stepping into the training of AI coaches, because where do these AI coaches get the right kind of program, the right kind of approach? It's clearly from years, if not centuries, of experience of the one-on-one human conversations. So I think it's a combination of all of that, the platforms, the data, the analytics, the skills, and continuing upgrades to skills that is now allowing us to deliver coaching at a significant scale and make a paradigm jump into a different kind of culture in organizations with employees getting support at all levels.
The access and democratization of coaching is so huge. And it's amazing because you laid such a wonderful foundation with this book and with your work. And then, as leader of the NYU Coaching and Technology Summit, with technology evolving so rapidly, you'd like to share more about the conference and how it continues moving this conversation forward, especially at a pace where technology is changing so fast.
Yeah, this is such a great question. And I will give you a little bit of the history because we're in the fifth year of the conference. It started out, the very first conference we launched was right after the pandemic. And it was really just pre AI. So it was already called Coaching and Technology. And the reason was that, and I think everyone would agree, that the pandemic really changed our relationship to technology. Seriously, previous to the pandemic, just a couple of years, I remember going to conferences where there was a big conversation among coaches whether a phone coaching or even video coaching was even legitimate because the coaches obviously were insisting on face to face and I felt that was the only effective way of coaching. But pandemic changed all of that. We had a significant acceleration of technology adoption into the most human side of our working lives. And so the first conference was primarily with the platforms, companies that brought still live coaching synchronously, conversations with coaches working on the platforms, similar to what we're doing now. And then we had Better Up, we have Ezra, we have Coach Hub. It was literally just a handful of those companies who showed up, and it was a really dynamic conversation. And then what you are going to experience now in the fifth year of our conference, which will be June 15th, 16th, 2026, in New York on NYU campus, is not only how vast that ecosystem is, we literally do not have enough space. We have so many of these types of companies wanting to come in, and we have to say we will literally run out of space for people who want to come and join us. But also the diversification of how this coaching is being delivered. There are all flavors of different coaching methodologies, approaches, fully automated, semi automated, avatars. And what we're also seeing, and something that we really want to touch on at the end, is on day two, we're going to talk specifically about health and well being. And that is, again, humanizing coaching by not only helping people be more productive and efficient through these tools, but also helping people stay healthy, stay motivated, and help individuals, workers to maintain their well being through the tools that are now available through their organizations.
It's incredible growth. I can't even imagine what that must look like to watch this journey through and through. It's just a tremendous opportunity.
Definitely. Obviously, our students are attending, et cetera, students who are currently in our HR program and our coaching program, because that is the future. They're walking into the workplace that will have all of those tools available. And speaking about the skills that will not be automated, even though we are going to be consistently working with these technologies, it's really the design of the workplace that is adapted to humans, augmented through technology, is in such big demand because no one knows what the effective organization would look like in the future.
Absolutely. And speaking of skills that won't be replaced by humans, I know this question comes up all the time, at least at the beginning, is will technology ultimately replace the need for human coaches? And having to reframe that conversation. I know NYU has already been such a leader nationally and globally in terms of its coaching education. And now, especially with the launch of this new health and well-being coaching certificate this fall. A lot of that is reflective on your leadership. So as
Thank
just leading for the health and wellness coaching, the certificate, it wouldn't have been possible. As you work with many organizations, you realize these programs can only happen when you have leadership that's an advocate. If you'd love to share more about what your vision is for the coaching education at NYU and what you've built.
Yes, Jessica, thank you. And it was a combination. I always had that curiosity about humans at work and holistic approach and all of that. And I heard you speaking on the stage at one of our joint conferences with ICF New York City. And it was just like a light bulb. I think it was a conversation sort of semi related to what we're discussing here in more general terms. And not only did I see the future and had a vision of how it would fit in with NYU in our portfolio of coaching programs, but also you were the exact individual I was looking for. And I wasn't even looking, I didn't know I was looking. But it's kind of serendipity. It's being in the right place at the right time. And this is where I love our conference. Yes, we schedule, we program, et cetera, et cetera. But the magic of the conference is bringing all of these people together. And then the fireworks. People make connections. We had so many companies partnering with each other, finding each other at our conferences. We have students working as student hosts for all of our sponsors and speakers and helping and learning as they're actively contributing to the success of the conference. And I think that anything that could be prescribed, predicted, etc., formalized, put in a box is going to be vulnerable to automation. But the magic of a human to human connection and what unexpected outcome it may produce, most of the time it's very positive. And that's what we're really investing in, mostly allowing space at the university that is not commercially driven. It's really about knowledge, collaboration, and bringing the right talent into one space. You're going to see new people showing up. We have Mayo Clinic when it comes to health and well-being. We're now, for the first time, going to have Langone participate. And we are hoping that at least locally, so that initially people don't have to travel. And we're fortunate to be in New York City, where there's such high concentration of universities and medical facilities and systems. Sort of broaden the conversation. And then it's just going to be a question of our capacity to make things happen, following these connections and bringing, again, the next generation talent to continue to solve for the problems that we've been wrestling with for centuries right now.
Absolutely. It's a fight to fight, but even the beauty of education and especially being in a place like NYU is the ability to have that access with credibility and no vested interests.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much. This is going to be exciting. Obviously, we're inviting everyone who's listening to join us. We sell out usually, and so we're running low on the remaining tickets. And we're not doing streaming on this one because of again, the very deliberate design of people interacting face to face.
Absolutely. I know we've covered a lot of ground today. And so, just to wrap up this conversation for the coaches and healthcare professionals, doctors who are listening to this conversation, do you have any takeaway message for them?
I think the future is ours. In fact, I think the humanity is looking to us to help us make it through this particular disruption and stay whole and stay human. Obviously, there are so many concerns about what these technologies are going to do to us. And severing that link of humans and work is one of the biggest concerns because most of us drive not only meaning, income, but also health from being positively engaged in producing outcomes, results, and making a difference in the society. And I think we're at the point where we need to figure out new ways of relating to this reality as well as relating to ourselves. And we need a lot of personalized tools because each and every one of us is going through our own transition. And I think coaching as a method that allows for this level of personalization, giving the tools not only to be productive, but also to stay healthy and whole, both mental health and physical health, enabling individuals to the extent that is possible to take care of themselves at that level. And then obviously bringing whole persons to communities. This is where healthy communities thrive. So the stakes are huge in this transition. And I want to be on the solution side of the issue. And I think everyone who's listening, and Jessica, your work, your contribution to us is also a step in the right direction. We just need to be more confident and we need to be visible and known. And that's where your podcast comes in. I think it's really important because there's so much noise in the space. And I think that we all have to take this responsibility very seriously.
Absolutely. And speaking with you, I'm always humbled by just the power of when you stay true to your curiosity. Like you mentioned initially, you're curious about humans at work and how it turned into so many things and contributions to society over the course of a career is the power of one person, not only to change our own lives, but the lives of those around us. And I really want to say thank you so much for your time, for sharing. For listeners listening to this, all the resources mentioned in this will be in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It was a real pleasure. And I am particularly excited to be launching this course with you in the fall.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you and value your feedback, so please subscribe and write a constructive review. If you'd like to be informed of new episodes and offerings and resources for coaches, sign up for our email list at www.centerforhealthandwellnesscoaches.com. Sending you warmth and light.